I reviewed more than 225 different bourbons and whiskeys in 2025 on my quest to find the best whiskey of the year. And today it is time to announce my top 10 whiskeys of 2025. So pour up one of your favorites and let's get right into the list. Welcome back, everybody. If you are new here, my name is Brandon Spinner, the Whiskey Weatherman, and you have stormed yourself into the one YouTube channel where it is always whiskey weather. Now, 2025 has been an unforgettable year in the world of American whiskey. There were a ton of brand new releases with a whole lot of hype around them to go along with those amazing annual releases that everyone seems to covet. Now, as I was compiling this list of best whiskeys and putting together my final standings, there were a few of them that jumped out to me as a little bit more of a surprise on my list than I was expecting. So make sure to stick around to the end of the video to see whether or not they're surprises to you as well. A couple of caveats to discuss before we dive into the full list. If I wasn't able to try a whiskey, that means I wasn't able to rate or review it. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to try every single release this year. So if it's one of your favorites and you don't see it on this list, that's probably why. Second, I rated and ranked each and every whiskey on this list using the exact same rating scale, which is my own custom 10-point rating scale, which I call the lightning counter. It takes into account 5 different factors, all in equal weight, which adds up to a total of 10 points. And those factors are the nose, the flavor, the mouthfeel, the finish, and finally the value. From there, I blind reviewed the top 20 highest rated whiskeys on my list in 2025, all against each other 4 separate times. And because I spent so much time putting together this list, I thought that it would be a bit of an injustice to just give you my top 10 whiskeys of the year. So instead, I'm going to be giving you my top 20 whiskeys of 2025. And checking in at number 20 is the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Heritage Barrel Tennessee Whiskey. This is a bottle I am glad it is back. It is supposed to be an everyday shelfer, as this has a ton of great flavor and some great value. And once again, this one checks in as number 20th on my list. 19th on the list is the Penelope American Light Whiskey, age 17 years. This is a sleeper of a pick this year. A lot of great confectionery sugars and vanillas. I loved the 15-year release from 2023, and I've been hunting the 17-year all year long since February. It's been a bottle on my list to find, and thankful that I was able to find one here in the month of December. Great value on this with an MSRP of $100. Super excited to have that one, and if you can find one, don't hesitate to buy it. Checking in at number 18 on my list is this Heaven Hill 19-year-old Heritage Collection Wheated Whiskey. Now, this is a huge ranking for this whiskey because last year, the Heaven Hill Heritage Collection 18-year finished as one of my most disappointing whiskeys of 2024. This one is way better. It is super delicious. Now, I do know people are going to complain about the price, and that's warranted. This has an MSRP of $300. They're also going to probably complain about the proof because this was proofed at 100, but I do think that is a fabulous spot for it. It is fantastic, delicious, some butterscotch notes, a great whiskey in my opinion. Coming in at 17 is another high-priced whiskey, and that is the Russell's Reserve Single Rickhouse CNE. Russell's Reserve, or the folks over at Wild Turkey, have been putting out some amazing whiskeys the last couple of years, and this one is just as good. I do still stand by the fact that instead of spending the $300 on this, like I mentioned in that video up there on the skip these 10 overrated bottles and overpriced bottles, that I would probably lean towards the single barrel version of this. Well, that is not quite as good. It's about a third of the price, but damn, this is a very, very good whiskey. And if you are able to find one at MSRP and you got $300 to spare, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. At number 16 on my list is this Still Austin Bottled & Bond Red Corn Bourbon. This bottle is a great blend of sweet and spicy. It is one of the best Texas whiskeys I've ever tried. Still Austin has been putting out some great whiskey over the last several years, and honestly, I think this is one of the best that they have ever released. Now, those are my 20 through 16 numbers. As we jump into the top 15, we are going with this bottle of the Calumet Farm 18-year. This is the Centennial Collection Celebration, front runner for a lot of people's best bourbons and whiskeys of 2025. I did think it was delicious. This is a bit of a surprise to me on this list because when I did originally review that earlier on this year, I was a little critical about it, and I still will say I don't think it is the best bourbon of the year. It is delicious. It still is a little bit over oaked and bitter on the back end for me. The one knock on this, most people are going to knock it for, is its price tag. This has an MSRP of $500. Now, if you had to give me $500 to buy a bourbon or a whiskey this year, I probably wouldn't spend that $500 on this. There are a couple other bottles on my list today that I would buy over this, and that's again why it doesn't make my top 10, but still, nonetheless, checking in at 15, pretty impressive. My number 14 whiskey of 2025 is the Four Roses Limited Edition Small Batch 2025 release. Last year's release finished in my top 20 as well. I do think that this is much better than last year's release. There's a whole lot of flavor and depth to this. I get a whole lot of fruit off of this year's release. Very happy that I was able to find one at MSRP at one of my local Krogers. Now at 13, is the Bamberger's Precision Fine Grain, which a lot of people know as PFG. Earlier this year, I made the joke that the PFG stood for pretty fucking good, and I will stand by that. This is a really unique whiskey with some dark tobacco notes, some dark cherries, a whole lot of flavor. One of the best things that I've tasted from Michter's in recent years. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a bottle for myself. This bottle is my buddy Ajay's, who has allowed me to rate it and review it this year, and also borrow it for a few of these videos. But this is one that I'll definitely be keeping an eye on as we're moving on into 2026. Now, as we move on to number 12 on my list, Penelope. They've been having an amazing year, and at number 12 is the Penelope Estate Collection Founders Reserve 13 year. Now, when I fresh cracked this for my original review, I thought this was fantastic. I still think it is a great whiskey, but when it was blinded against some of the other bourbons and whiskeys on this list, it just didn't fare well, and it lost all 6 times when it was blinded against my number 11 whiskey of 2025, and that is the Penelope Estate Collection Private Select 10 year. This might be the best value on my list this year, as it comes in at $80, and it's probably the easiest of the bunch to find, especially the top 15, because there were more than 40,000 bottles of this made and released this year. So that is certainly a bottle to keep an eye out for, and I don't think it's allocated in every state as well. Now, before I give you my top 10 whiskeys of 2025, if you are a fan of honest bourbon reviews that skip the hype and all the other BS, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. It costs you nothing, and it helps the channel grow in a massive way. I started 2025 at just 6,000 subscribers, and as we record this video, we are just over the 27,000 subscriber mark. I have some big plans and some big goals as we head on into 2026, and I would love to have you as a part of that crew. And now time for that aforementioned top 10. And checking in at number 10 is the Eagle Rare 17 year Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Yes, this is part of the BTAC lineup. I was lucky enough that I was able to try this at the Incline Public House in Cincinnati, Ohio. They have a really underrated selection of whiskeys at a very reasonable price for most of their pours, especially for this day and age. So if you're ever in the area, that's definitely a spot you're going to want to check out. As for the whiskey itself, I didn't want to like it because it was just going to create more of that FOMO, but this was fantastic. The nose on this is amazing, and it was really reminiscent to me of like an RC Cherry Cola. The flavors on the palate was classic Eagle Rare, just turned up to 11. A lot of great caramels, vanillas, as well as some oak, a ton of flavor. I scored this one an 8.9 out of 10 on my Lightning Counter rating scale, and in fact, numbers 6 through 10 all scored an 8.9 out of 10 on that same rating scale, but in the blind, they just fared better than the others. At number 9 on that list is another 8.9 score, and that is this Still Austin Tanager Batch 2, the 2025 release. This was a late entry onto my list, as this just came out in the early parts of December. This is not my bottle. Again, lucky enough that my buddy Ajay was able to grab one and allow me to review it. This is the best Texas whiskey that I've ever tried. This has no business being as good as it is for just 6 years old. They have not dropped in Northern Kentucky. I don't think that they will drop in Northern Kentucky, because I believe that they have a exclusive drop rights to Total Wine. So if you are in the state of Kentucky, you're going to have to find the Total Wine. In Ohio, it should be dropping soon. And in some states, it is already dropped. So keep an eye out for this one. This is fantastic. I loved last year's batch, and now I need one of my own. My number 8 whiskey of 2025 is this A. Smith Bowman Cask Strength Batch 4. It is a few decimal points away from being a hazmat. This one is bottled at 139.7 proof. I don't really think it drinks that hot. Has a ton of great flavors. I really call it George T. Stagg's little cousin. I believe this was just around 10 years old. Yeah, 10 years old. Batch 4. I think it beats Batch 3 from last year, which I thought was pretty good. This one is just even better. But beating that in my number 7 whiskey of 2025 is one of those surprises on my list, and that is the 2025 New Riff High Note First Decade Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. This is the oldest rye whiskey that New Riff has ever released at 10 years old, but to me this has more of a bourbon profile to it, with some nice brown sugars, some dark red fruits. It has really surprised me in the blinds. I had this, I thought, more so near 15 on my list when I started, and it jumped all the way into the top 7. Fantastic. The only unfortunate thing is this was a distillery only online release and it sold out in just 7 minutes. That is my 3rd best rye of the year. My 2nd best rye on this list is the Thomas H. Handy Sazerac Straight Rye Whiskey, my number 6 whiskey of 2025. This is extremely crushable. In fact, I opened it a couple of weeks ago and you can see how much damage I've done to it. I didn't have really any expectations for it, but this one is one that I could go back to over and over again. I call it candy in a glass. I think it is the best rye whiskey that Buffalo Trace put out this year. Fantastic. I do remember saying in one of my previous reviews that I thought the Sazerac Full Proof would stand up to it in a blind. This absolutely crushed it. Now, before I give you my top 5 whiskeys of 2025, if you want full access to my entire Lightning Counter rating scale, I have a link below in the description. Make sure to check out that link, fill out your information, and I'll send over the link to the entire Lightning Counter rating scale so you can see what each and every bottle got rated on my list here in 2025. Speaking of 2025, coming in at number 5, my number 5 whiskey is the Wild Turkey Master's Keep Beacon, which I reviewed in this video up here. I did mention that it is one of my favorites of the year. This is classic Wild Turkey, just slightly darker. I did do a blind in that video versus the Russell's 15, and the 15 did still beat this, but this is one of the best pours that I've ever had from Wild Turkey. And I do think that this is pretty apropos for being the final release of the Master's Keep series. If I had $300 to spend again for a backup, I would totally buy a backup of it. That's just how good it is to me. This scored a 9.0 out of 10. Also, checking in with a 9.0 out of 10, and my 4th rated whiskey of 2025. This is my top rye of the year. That is the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Special Release Tannard Hill Rye. This rye whiskey is wild. It's got an MSRP of just 80 bucks, I believe. 70% rye, 18% corn, 12% malted barley mash bill. It is charcoal filtered, just like their normal Tennessee whiskey before it goes into the barrel. This release had barrels that were ranging from 130.2 proof to all the way up to about 149 proof. I think it has some great brown sugar notes to it, along with this nice tobacco note. But the one thing that really stood out to me out of this one that I had never tried or had at least come through on a whiskey is this weird fruit punch note that is just fantastic. I was able to try 3 different of these releases. All of them were fantastic, each in their own right. If you are able to find one of these, don't pass it up. Again, this scores a 9.0 out of 10 on my Lightning Counter rating scale. Now we jump on into the top 3, and coming in at number 3 for my 3rd best whiskey of 2025 is the George T. Stagg Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. There's a reason this bottle is as hyped up as it is. It is incredible. This is the first Hazmat GTS release since 2016, and just like the Bowman a couple minutes ago, this one does not drink anywhere near its proof. It's bottled at 142.8 proof, but I'd say it probably drinks into the upper 120s, low 130s. It is fantastic. This is the best bottle of the BTAC collection this year, in my opinion, and is also some of the best whiskey that you're ever going to get from Buffalo Trace. A ton of great oak, vanilla, and cherry notes, but I also get some nice tobaccos. But the one note that stood out to me on this one that is super delicious and surprising was a nice root beer note that was absolutely stunning. This goes a 9.1 out of 10 on my lightning counter rating scale. I mentioned earlier, if I had $500 to spend on another bottle, this might be the one that I would drop that $500 for. Just hope if you find it, it's not that expensive. My number 2 best whiskey of 2025 is probably the most surprising on my list, and that is the Penelope aged 20 years American light whiskey. As I mentioned, I did this blind lineup several times, 4 times, matter of fact. Each time this bottle finished in the top 2, and one of those times it tied with my number 1 whiskey for the best whiskey of the year. Now, this was a limited release from the folks over at Penelope. I got this one at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. This has a ton of great, amazing confectionery sugars, some vanillas, a creme brulee note. It's almost like a vanilla cupcake to me. This one scores a 9.2 out of 10. This is way better than the 17-year, and the 17-year finished as my 19th best whiskey, as you saw just a few minutes ago. This one just blows it out of the water. And that means we are at my number 1 whiskey of 2025. Let's get a drum roll, please. My number 1 whiskey of 2025 should be a surprise to no one. That is the Jack Daniel's 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey. As I mentioned, shouldn't be a surprise because if you've been watching any of my reviews this year, you've known that this has been pretty much at the top of the list all year long. It's been the highest rated on my list all year long. Might be the best I've ever had from the Jack Daniel's brand ever. It is kind of wild to know that this comes from the exact same mash bill as the classic Jack Daniel's number 7. I get a bunch of great vanilla and oak notes out of this, but the one thing that really stands out is this beautiful bananas Foster's note that I get every time. Every time I go back to this bottle, it is just as good as the first time I poured it. Again, it is a 9.2 out of 10, just like the Penelope American Light Whiskey. So there you have it, my top 20 best whiskeys of 2025. But I do also want to toss in a few honorable mentions. Now, as I was creating this list, there were a few whiskeys that I wanted to include in my top 20. I just didn't know how I could really score them or put them in my top 20 because they were either absolute unicorns or just really hard to get single barrels that no one was ever going to find. And the first one I want to give a shout out of is part of the Penelope Estate collection. This is the 16-year-old single barrel rye. This bottle is phenomenal. It did finish on my list as the second best rye whiskey that I had here in 2025. It is a single barrel though, and that is where I had a hard time putting it on my list. There's only 88 bottles of this. This does score a 9.0 out of 10 on my lightning counter rating scale, as this was fantastic. And it was only available at the 2025 Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Next up on the list is probably the best whiskey that I have ever tried, and that is this year's King of Kentucky, specifically Barrel 36. Because it is a single barrel and it's not distributed in all states, and because barrel to barrel they vary, again, didn't think it was going to be as genuine to put it on my list, but it is the best whiskey I've ever tried. Lucky I was able to grab a bottle earlier this year at Costco. They call it the King for a reason, folks. If you're able to try it, don't hesitate to try it. And then the final 2 bottles that I want to give a shout out on this list and honorable mentions are the Augusta Buckner's 13-year-old single barrels. I was lucky enough to pick 2 different ones this year. This one is 148.3 proof and another one is 141.6 proof. These are some of the best bourbons, again, that I've ever had. They both scored a 9.2 out of 10 on my rating scale, but I did find it probably to be a little disingenuous to put my own barrel picks in the top 20, especially when they were single barrels that sold out in less than 80 minutes to all my Patreon members. But those are some great whiskeys. And speaking of Patreon members and memberships, I have to thank all of my Patreon members and YouTube members who have made the 2025 year such a success. It's been so fun here in 2025, and I'm really looking forward to what we have in store in 2026. And speaking of barrel picks, if you want early access to those bottles that I just mentioned, like the Buckner's picks, I had about 13 different single barrels in 2025, and I've already got a ton more on the way as we head on into 2026. You can join the 1,000 members of what I call my Storm Chasers, which are my Patreon and YouTube members. They get first access to barrel picks. They get some exclusive content along with some membership perks. As I mentioned, I got several barrels on tap to drop in the early weeks of 2026. And if you want first access to that, just check out being part of the Storm Chaser Network. And I have those links in the description below. I do want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Hopefully you got a little bit of value out of it. And if so, please don't forget to smash that like button below. But if you want to help this channel grow even more, there's a new feature called the Hype feature, which you can only do on a mobile device. But if you are watching on a mobile device, down in the comments area, if you swipe over, you should see the Hype button. By pressing that, that helps push this channel into everybody else's algorithm as we're trying to take this channel to new heights, into a new atmosphere. Now, don't forget to also check out the description below with that link where you can click on to get access to the 2025 Lightning Counter rating scale, where you can see where each and every whiskey that I reviewed this year winded up and what their score was. So don't forget to check that out. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're a fan of honest bourbon and whiskey reviews without any of that fluff, BS, and hype, you're gonna love some of my other previous reviews as well as swap videos, just like this video up here on the top right, where I take 10 overhyped and overpriced bottles of bourbon and whiskey and give you 9 different alternative swaps to keep an eye out for. You're gonna love that video. And before we get to that, I'm gonna end this the same way I always do. Please remember to drink responsibly. It is always whiskey weather. We'll see you in that swap video, and we'll see you in the new year. Cheers, y'all. Happy New Year.